Hello, I'll be talking about cultural attitudes, medical care, and traditions concerning pregnancy and prenatal care. I've titled this project Cross-Cultural Attitudes Towards Pregnancy, as I'll be focusing on essentially three cultures' views and practices towards pregnancy. Traditional Native American cultures, Europeans, and colonial culture at pre- and post-contact, as well as modern Western culture and beliefs concerning pregnancy. As a side note, I feel I should point out that while doing my research, I could not find too much information regarding a specific tribe or group of Native Americans, so my discussion of traditional viewpoints will contain information on several tribes, primarily the Navajos. The first point I would like to consider is the opinion each culture has towards pregnancy itself and towards women who are pregnant. According to Changes in Childbirth Knowledge, traditional Navajo mentality towards pregnancy places a considerable amount of emphasis on expectant mother's mental well-being. She is encouraged to think positively and to not be afraid of the actual act of childbirth. Women are encouraged to pray more, especially in the morning, and fathers are encouraged to try and keep the peace at home so they do not upset their pregnant wife. The Guide to Culturally Competent Healthcare outlines some interesting traditions that expectant Navajo mothers follow during their pregnancy. These include but are not limited to going to ceremonies while pregnant, as the child may be exposed to very strong spirits, which is something we've certainly discussed in class. It is also considered bad to look at a dead animal carcass or human body, or to kill an animal at all. Women also do not typically purchase clothing for their baby before it is born, as it is seen as bad luck to do so before the birth. Non-native individuals, such as medical caregivers, often confuse this as a sign that the mother does not want to keep her child, which is certainly false. Women are encouraged to prepare mentally for their coming child, but are discouraged from making too many physical preparations for their little one, as part of their community's traditions. The community as a whole is encouraged to celebrate the arrival of a new child, and it is a source of joy for the whole tribe. These native traditions and attitudes differ considerably to historical Eurocentric ideas towards pregnancy. In the book Lying In, A History of Childbirth in America, women are described as basically vessels into which a baby is placed and nourished. Concern was placed far more on the future child's well-being and much less on the mother's comfort and well-being. Women were encouraged to hide their pregnancy from the community for as long as possible, as it was seen as an almost shameful state for a woman to find herself in. Overall, pregnancy was considered a burden women just had to endure without complaint, even though childbirth was often very dangerous. While women were encouraged to have many children, the idea of pregnancy was considered immodest, as it reminded people too much of how babies are made in the first place. During this time, women were also encouraged to physically exert themselves as little as possible, since it was considered bad for the baby. While this is true to some extent and was also encouraged by Native Americans, some European communities took this to the extreme. Women were often told to stay needlessly bedridden and held hostage in their homes for periods of lying in. Thankfully, modern attitudes towards pregnancy seem to be more closely resembling traditional Native ideas. Women are encouraged to prepare both physically and mentally for the oncoming birth, similar to the Navajo mothers. The seminal book on modern pregnancy, What to Expect When You're Expecting, gives expectant mothers tons of advice for every stage of their pregnancy. However, while childbirth has become a source of joy for the modern family, celebrations are typically limited to the expectant parent's family and close friends, unlike for Native American tribes that find the birth to be a cause for celebration for the whole community. Secondly, I'd like to consider some traditional medicines and nutritional practices certain Native Americans have for pregnancy, and compare these to modern and historical medicine. While conducting my research, I discovered prenatal care is a fairly new concept. Before the modern era, prenatal care consisted mostly on ensuring proper nutrition among Native Americans. Traditionally, pregnant Native American women are cared for and guided through their pregnancies by other female relatives or members of the tribe. Ketsi Cook, a Mohawk woman and member of the Indigenous Women's Network, gives an account of what berries and plants are helpful to Mohawk women during their pregnancies on the website kstrom.net, which I've provided a link to. She describes strawberries, red raspberries, cranberries, and sumac berries as being loaded with vitamins and minerals, which are essential for pregnant women. She also goes on to say that elderberries are avoided during pregnancy since some of their chemicals can be toxic. Nutrition is an essential component to a healthy pregnancy, when vitamins are needed in much higher quantities, especially vitamin C. This was well understood by Native American tribes who were able to find these vitamins in the berries they traditionally harvested in the spring and summer. One of the things she also describes is the use of partridge berry for regulating and cleansing the female reproductive tract and for aiding in soreness in breastfeeding. Native Americans were able to find many medicines in nature which colonists either did not have access to or were not aware of. In contrast to Native American pregnancy care, nutrition was not well understood by Europeans or colonists. Women routinely did not have enough to eat, especially women of lower classes, or their diets were often unvaried and consisted mostly of grains. This often resulted in nutritional deficits. As discussed in childbearing and infancy in the Carolingian world, women were expected to be especially pure of mind and soul during their pregnancies. As with Navajo women, pregnant women were encouraged to pray more. However, during medieval times, religious practices often prescribed fasting as a way to accomplish a greater level of purity like that of the Madonna. This is obviously a bad idea for the developing child, as it leads to nutritional shortages and developmental problems or loss of the pregnancy. Shortages. Obviously, the concept of eating for two was completely absent in this era. This fasting often left the mother and developing child without crucial nutrients such as iron, folic acid, and vitamins. Throughout history, women are also routinely consumed alcoholic beverages, which could lead to developmental problems. Women were often blamed for the loss of a pregnancy, with everything from allowing demons into their bodies to being impure of thought being laid down as the reason. At this time, little medical care was provided to the mother since very little was understood about pregnancy or reproduction besides basic anatomy. Modern prenatal care addresses the issue of nutrition by consumption of prenatal vitamins high in folic acid. The idea of poor nutrition among today's modern pregnancy is much less daunting. As described in What to Expect When You're Expecting, women often undergo screenings and ultrasounds to best gauge the progress their child is making. This is a completely modern concept, as there was very little way to gauge developmental progress before the advent of the ultrasound, other than by measuring a woman's growth during her pregnancy. Next, I'd also like to compare the roles men play and have played in women's pregnancies. As I said before, in Native American traditions, the pregnant woman is guided through her pregnancy and delivered of her child by a female relative or other tribe member. Men were often not allowed to be with a woman as she was in labor, but of course assisted her as he could during her pregnancy. Very similar situations existed in old European and colonial times. Women had midwives to assist in childbirth and gave birth in their homes with little to no help from men or doctors. That is until around 1750, when male doctors took over the practice of childbirth. This is especially interesting considering the male doctor, with few exceptions, was not a relative. As I stated before, during this time pregnancy was considered immodest, and women were very uncomfortable with the idea of a strange man probing them during their delicate state. As described in Lying In, this often led to uncomfortable situations between the pregnant woman and her doctor, where he would be performing an exam or delivery but would not be watching what he was doing. You can see here a drawing from the pregnant woman's of a doctor during a delivery with a sheet placed over the woman so he could not see her in an inappropriate manner. Eventually, this male doctor home birth became the male doctor hospital birth. While some obstetricians today are women, obviously few are directly related to their patients, which is another difference between traditional Native American births and modern medicine. With very few exceptions, most births today occur in a hospital setting. Thankfully, the ridiculous problem of maintaining modesty has become a thing of the past. Most modern medicine has replaced traditional herbal medicines for labor with epidurals and pitocin. Also different from traditional Native American births, today fathers are encouraged to be present at the birth of their children in order to give support and encouragement to the laboring mother. Fathers are also playing increasingly supportive roles during a woman's pregnancy by attending classes, assisting in purchasing items for the baby, and reading the baby books like What to Expect When You're Expecting. On a sadder note, I'm going to close this video on a topic that came up quite a bit in my research and that I honestly found quite disturbing, which affects most modern Native American women. During my research, I discovered that the access to prenatal health care for Native American women was actually quite a bit more limited than it is to non-Native women. As described in disparities in infant health among American Indians and Alaska Natives in U.S. metropolitan areas, 14.4% of Native American women did not receive adequate prenatal health care. Native Americans experience a much higher infant mortality rate, where 11 out of 1,000 births resulted in a death of an infant. Lower birth rate at 5.7% and higher instances of miscarriage among these women. This is absolutely one of the most shocking things that I've ever heard. In an age with so many medical advances, it's really heartbreaking to hear of Native American women still experiencing such hardship for being Native American. For these infants to experience such racism at such an early age is truly horrible. I don't know where the blame should go for this, but it is my belief that something as joyous as pregnancy and childbirth should not be marred by racism and offensive tendencies. Well, it's been my pleasure to present my research to you and to have learned so much about Anishinaabe culture from you. Thank you.